Today I'm joined by someone very special, Angelique L'Amour. And Angelique is an author, and the name may be familiar to you. She's the daughter of the well known author Louis L'Amour. And today we're going to hear about Angelique's own journey with writing, what she's currently doing, and what she has planned for the future. Welcome, Angelique. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here.
There's so much I want to hear, and I think the most logical place to start is in the past, and then we'll continue through to the present and move on to the future. So the big burning question, as the daughter of Louis L'Amour, a big name, what was it like growing up as the daughter of being a writer now, as the daughter of a writer?
Well, he was really amazing. He was really easy to be around. He wasn't someone who closed his office and said, "You can't talk to me between the hours of, 8 and 5." He was very much an active part of our family and very involved with us kids, my brother and myself. We were respectful. I think mom had always made sure that we understood, that the importance of what he did, that he was writing, and he wrote 365 days a year, every year, my entire life. So it wasn't unusual to see him writing. And he never really had too much of a problem with us interrupting him, but we tried not to. And thinking back now as an adult, and I was mentioning my office is in my kitchen, and I'm very much in the hub of the house, which at times I would really like to not be, but I don't have much of a choice in where I'm living and how I'm living. So he arranged his day. So he had breakfast with us every morning, and then he would see us off to school, and then he would go write. And when we came home from school, he was either just finishing up a workout or he was working out. So he had this break around 3 o'clock, and we could go talk to him when he was working out. He used to do an old boxer workout with punching a heavy bag and skipping rope and lifting weights and the whole thing. So I never felt cut off from my dad, even though he worked every day and told great stories.
Did he tell stories? Was he a storyteller to the family?
That is him. Yeah, and he always was learning something new, and he was always trying to. He was always challenging himself. He was always learning. He was always researching and always trying to discover something new and exciting for himself, for what he was working on, what he had planned in the future. And so he always had something new to tell us, and always had something exciting or interesting about anywhere that we went. We traveled as a family. We traveled for his research. So whereas my friends might be going, I don't know, to San Francisco or Hawaii or whatever, I was going to the middle of nowhere to see a rock. And I loved it because he always made it fun and interesting. But I do remember the first time we ever went to Hawaii because he was speaking at an English teachers convention, and I was like, wow, I'm finally doing something kind of normal. It's kind of fun. But most of our trips were mapped out by his research. And he always managed to do some form of publicity while he was on there doing autograph things and things like that. So I grew up in a house with the sound of a typewriter and in bookstores.
As children, what we see is typically what we think is normal. What other, until we see other influences, what other influences came into your life that also shaped you?
I think because Dad was interested in everything, and because he was, he was known as a Western writer, but he was known as a Western writer because his first big hit after World War II was that he had a short story that was developed into a novel that became a movie starring John Wayne. And all of a sudden, he was the Western writer. And so that guided him for a while. He was like, okay, I'm a Western writer. I'm going to be the Western writer. Before that, he had written everything. So he'd written short stories for lots of different magazines, and he'd written stories about boxers, and he'd written
Mhm.
detective stories like Raymond Chandler style hard-boiled detective stories, and he'd written stories about the South Seas, and he'd written everything, and westerns. And so the history that was covered in the library in our house was like from the beginning of time to present day. And our social circle as a family was, we were really dear friends with this enormous Thai family, several generations of them. Uh, One of them is a dear friend of mine, and a friend who had a pre-Columbian art gallery, and we had friends who were Native Americans. And so um, it was a very diverse background. It was a very, very interesting and creative social circle to be in. We had he he was asked. He spoke. I think he spoke at Caltech almost every year for the scientists. So it was a very interesting way to grow up because we were
Mhm.
constantly being exposed to far beyond what our peers were being exposed to in the way of science and history and art and all of that. And I think also my friends' dads, got up in the morning and they went to work and they came home. And it
Mhm.
was kind of mysterious. And for us, it was really obvious that the way things happened was dad sat down and he wrote. And that's how our life was paid for. I do recall the first time I didn't know that was weird. And when I was in seventh grade, for some reason, our English teacher, who hated me, um, really, really mean woman. She went around the classroom and asked everybody what their father did for a living. And when she got to me, she said, "What does your dad do for a living?" I said, "He's a writer." And she said, "What else does he do?" And I'm like, "Well, he works out every day at 3 o'clock." And I came home and I said, "Dad, why'd she ask me what else you did?" And he said, "Because nobody makes a living as a writer. Like, you just don't." And I was at a private school. So it was, he was a successful writer.
Mhm.
So, that was the first time I really think I started to realize that it was unusual.
Did you put together that it was unusual to be a successful writer or that writing was unusual? Do you remember?
I don't think writing's ever been unusual.
Yeah.
I think it was more that I didn't realize that anybody thought you couldn't make a living as a writer.
Mhm.
And he used to say, I knew it. I always knew. I always knew I was going to make a living as a writer. I didn't know I was going to do this well. I didn't know I was going to be this successful, sell this many books, and have this experience. So that was surprising even to him, even though he dreamed it, planned it, worked every day towards it for forever. Um, he was still honored by it, and grateful for it, and happy that he was entertaining people and they were enjoying what he was doing because he was born a storyteller.
Well, and it's interesting because it's like you said, he wrote many other things. He was working at it, he was taking action. Um, and I read somewhere that you wrote your first piece when you were 4. Is
When I
that
was Yes,
correct?
when I was 4, I wrote a song about my beagle. And it's interesting because dad would say he just wrote and he wrote what he wanted to read. And I found, and I still find today, that there's something subconscious that happens. I put my hands on the keyboard and I write, and it isn't like I write, okay, I have to write this sentence about this thing. It just happens. Now that doesn't mean I don't rewrite. Dad didn't rewrite. I rewrite a lot. But I don't have an issue with beginning, and I don't have an issue with wondering what to write. I don't really believe in writer's block. I think that's a I don't want to call it. I think it's a cop out, which gets people very angry. But I think it's a way of stopping yourself and protecting yourself, as opposed to saying, well, okay, why do I not want to write? I have too many ideas. I feel like him in that way, that I have too many ideas and not enough time.
Mhm.
So um, I did write that song when I was 4, and by the time I was 7, I had written enough poetry that my Father's Day gift or birthday gift, I'm not sure, to my dad was a volume of my own poetry, um, that my mom's had bound, like had a bookbinder bind it for him, and it has a cover and everything. It's like white leather. It's really pretty. It's still at the house, and so that was it. And I just kept writing, and I didn't think about it much, but I think back now, and now having I taught writing for a year to a small parochial school near me, and I think about, like, what would I have thought if I'd had a kid like me in class with, like, my book open to take notes and my book open where I was writing short stories and songs. But that's how I went my way through school.
You have 2 children. Do they show the same indication to write?
Oh, they are resistant, but they are talented. So for years, my older daughter was like, I don't want to write. I don't want to write. Now she's more interested in writing, and she's in college, and she's really starting to see that she has a talent, and she has ideas, and she has stories to tell, and she wants to express them that way. She's an actress, um, but at the school she's at, there's a playwriting program, so she sees a lot of beginning playwrights and their material, and so she's kind of going, well, wait a second, I think I could. And then my younger daughter is also really talented with writing, but she's also kind of like, I don't want to write, I don't want to write. So, in their own time, there are talents in families. That's why there are doctors who have doctor children who have doctor children, and there are people who are artists. And my family is painters, artists from my father-in-law, and writing from my dad. But it's generational because he was published, his older sister was published. His other older sister had great talent as a poet, but she passed away young at 17. And then he has a brother who was a journalist, a newspaper man, and an editor. And so that was that one generation had 4 writers. So I just feel like it's in the blood.
I think there's something else to me that is screaming out that you may not think of. But from my perspective, in my world of coaching, you're embodying overcoming fears. In your family, when you say writer's block doesn't exist, what I hear, and I agree with you, it's writer's block is allowing your fear to speak louder than your action. Um, and with your daughters and all, being able to accept their ability and write if they choose to, so the family had that heritage, if you will, of being willing to put themselves forward also.
I think, you know, uh, years ago, you hear that line, "God helps those who help themselves," and I
Hmm.
and I firmly believe that you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't put yourself in the way of it, meaning put yourself in a position where there is an opportunity, where an opportunity can arise, where people can see your work, read your work, whatever it is, you could be the most incredible writer, actor, painter, whatever, even, CPA. But if you don't give yourself the opportunity to have that moment, um, you're not living up to your talent. I actually have an upcoming blog post, but by the time this is on, it will have been, that I'm working on, because I was thinking back to my last acting teacher. I was an actress for a number of years, and
Hmm.
he said, excuse me, he used to say, you have to have a talent for your talent. And what that means to me is that you have to have the ability to do the business side of promoting your talent. And you have to have the discipline, devotion to sit down and work at your talent. And that's why they say, 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. And I do believe that's true. And I watched it every day in my house. I watched my dad write every day. And so it wasn't something that was mysterious to me. It was, you know, dad's writing. Hear the, I can hear the typewriter, and books come out, books do better, books come out, books do better and better and better. My life, financially, our lives improved. I don't remember ever wanting for anything, but I think mom was very, very good at keeping us sort of from wanting things more than we were able to have at a time. And we were more of an experienced family anyway. We were more into travel than stuff.
Mhm.
So there was that. But yeah, I think that for me personally, fear is something that I try not to indulge. And I try to always keep my mind actively being positive. And sometimes that's a really hard thing to do.
Mhm.
I've certainly been challenged in my life that way. Um, but I guess there's a self discipline about saying, I'm not going to think that. And for me, the way I get rid of fear is by action,
Mhm.
by what can I do about this? And that really came out of a conversation with my brother when I was really upset. I was 14 years old, and I'd gone up to my choir teacher and I'd said, I really want to take private voice lessons from you this year. Do you have time? Like, when can we get together and when can we do this? And she looked at me and went, You? You shouldn't bother. And I was devastated. And I came home from school and I was telling my mom and I was weeping. And my brother looked at me and he said, Angelique, as only an older brother can, I've been listening to this for a while now. You see all that energy you're wasting crying? Why don't you take all that energy and do something about it? And I was like, oh. And I looked at my mother and I said, find me a voice teacher. Like, I don't have to go to the choir teacher. Find me a voice teacher. I can take tennis lessons. I'll take voice lessons. Let's go. And so she found me a voice teacher, and I started studying, and I sang for a really long time. But I didn't. That was always. I always hear my brother in the back of my head
Mhm.
saying, "You're that upset. Do something about it. You're scared. Do something about it. What can you do right now? You have that ability to make a decision."
As a huge illustration of that, your current publications, uh, and we'll talk about the timing of future books, but your current publications, you have a trio of books
I do.
that are quite a illustration of putting your action into something that you wanted to provide inspiration or help, or I want you to explain it in your words.
So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2009 in October, and I had to I had to wrap my mind around this idea, and I had to come up with things to put into my head that were not negative and were not scary. And I worked really hard at that, at being positive and finding the good and finding the humor. My dog's going to bark, um, and maybe, and there we
Hi,
go.
Patriot.
Hey, Patriot. Um, so so when I was going through it, I started a blog, and the blog was my experience, how I feel, and I had found that there were a lot of really scary places on the internet for people with cancer, like really scary, and there were a number of books that had been published that were really scary and negative, and I thought, I don't need that in my head at all. So I started the blog, and I wanted it to be a place where someone could go and not be scared, but but be dealt with honestly. So for me, it was a way of keeping myself positive, because if I could write about it in a positive light, it put me back in a positive mindset.
Hmm.
If I could write about it with humor, it put me in a positive mindset. And that was about my healing as much as it was about helping other people. But then I found I could help other people. And the idea for chemo cupcakes and carpools really came because as I was finishing my last chemo, having my last chemo, I had a girlfriend who was diagnosed, and I started writing. We started emailing back and forth, and I started giving her ideas, and she was like, you have a file on my computer now that's like Angelique wisdom," and I'm like, "That's fantastic, thank you." And she was in publicity, and she had been in publicity at Penguin Random House back when it was Bantam Doubleday Dell, back when
Mhm.
my initial book came out back in the 80s, and we'd known each other since we were 21. And she was like, "You have to write this. You have to write the girlfriend's guide to cancer." And I was like, "I don't want to write that book. I want to write my book about how I get my attitude together, and how like the spiritual side of the whole thing, and how to stay moving forward, and how to deal with this." But she's like, "But you've got all this great advice." And so I started both pieces. Hey, sorry, I just whistled at you.
That's okay.
Um, I started both. I started it as one piece, and as I started writing it, and then I would sort of end a chapter with, "Here's how to handle this." It was interrupting the book.
Ah,
It was becoming a commercial break that was ruining the flow of what I knew could be very powerful. And I thought, okay, so I really do need to do, the girlfriend's guide. And I wanted to make that happen separately. And at the same time, I had found this online class called Kindle in 30. And I thought, I'll take the class and I'll learn how to self publish. And
mhm.
I'll do this little book, and I'll learn everything I need to learn so that when I have the bigger one ready, I can do it with that one. And I don't have to rely on trying to get it published traditionally. I might, I still don't know on that one. And so I put it together and I published it. And basically, it came out of all the emails, because in the meantime, I had like 6 more friends diagnosed, and friends of friends, and sisters of friends, and fathers and mothers of friends. And I was giving the same advice and writing the same emails, copying and pasting emails. And so I thought, this material, this is all the material that needs to be in the book. So that's where it came from, was that book, those emails. And I wanted to write the book I needed, because the first thing that comes into your head as a parent when you're diagnosed with a life-threatening illness is, am I going to die? And the next thing's going to be, oh my God, what about my kids?
Yeah.
How do I? And if you're the primary caregiving parent, you're the stay-at-home mom or whatever, stay-at-home dad, it becomes even bigger.
Yeah.
And so I was really lucky. We were lucky on so many levels at that time. We had a friend who had just lost her job and was looking for another one, and she was like, "What can I do?" And I was like, "Okay, here's what you can do." And 2 or 3 days a week, she picked up our older daughter from her soccer practice and brought her home, because the soccer was right next to our friend's house. And then I had hired this babysitter to come one night a week, and I just looked at her and said, 4, I need you 4. And I took her in the garage and told her that I had cancer before I told my kids, because I needed to know if she could do it. And she was like, "That's great. I don't have to look for another babysitting job." I'm like, "No, you don't. You're done. You're here." And, so I just was like, it's like I had that, and I had a great group of people, and I had my mom. My mom's phenomenal and was instantaneously, what can I do? So I had a lot of support, but there's a lot of things that you're the only person that can do them when you're the primary caregiver. So you're like, okay, I'm the one that knows how to do that. So I have to teach somebody how to do that, or I have to figure out how I'm going to feel and when I can plan for that. So that's that's what that initial book came out of.
It's interesting. It's as if your cancer, the cancer, I hate personalizing it. It's like it then becomes yours and no. So it's as if the cancer um, chose a commercial break for you for your other book that you were working on because the message was needed.
Just every time I put off that information. I had somebody else get diagnosed that was in my circle.
Isn't that
So,
interesting?
so I just was like, okay, fine, fine,
Yeah.
fine. I'm done. It's coming out now. And
Yeah.
I just, and then I started giving it to friends, and then I had friends buying it for friends, but it's a very hard, it's a, it's an unusual market because there isn't another book. There are books written by cancer survivors about their experience. There are books written by doctors and nurses about their cancer experience, or they're co-written with their patient, things like that. But there isn't a, how do I get from Monday to Sunday?
Right.
What does that look like? What am I going to be able to do? What am I going to feel like being able to do? Am I going to be, you know, feeling horrible the whole time? Am I going to be throwing up every day? What's it going to be? And how do I do that and take care of my kids? And,
Yeah.
I'm lucky my husband works at home as well. And so there were a lot of people in my life, but I think it also works for, I just think it works for anybody who's really trying to figure out how to do it. And it was,
And I'm sorry.
it was overwhelming. Like
Yeah.
every aspect of it. I was looking at it. I was back in my calendar and realizing that I was diagnosed on September 24th and I had my double mastectomy on October 9th. That's 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks. It was either that or have it the day before Halloween. And my kids were 7 and 11, so we weren't missing Halloween.
No. And I did think of the irony of October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and here you are, there.
Here
Oh,
I am. That's your
yeah,
house.
yeah, pink everywhere.
Yeah, think
Oh,
everywhere.
oh, goodness. And I can't help but think of all kinds of markets where that would be so appropriate to just automatically help lots of people, not just women either. Their families would appreciate reading it so they would know how to be of support, and friends.
Yes, and I think that's one of the things I was really trying to do with the book is make it. I mean, it is about cancer, but quite honestly, it probably works for any life-threatening illness that means the primary parent is out of commission, or even the non-primary parent is out of commission. It doesn't really matter. We all have places we have to be, and we have, my determination was at the time. I made a decision. I made every decision based on the idea that I was teaching my daughters by example of how to deal with something that was truly frightening, truly sickening, like I felt crappy,
Hmm.
and teach them how to keep moving forward. And I didn't want their entire lives to be about cancer either. So I didn't want to, pull the drapes and let's just sit in here and be depressed about mommy
Hmm.
having cancer. I wanted them getting to school on time. I wanted them seeing their friends. I wanted them having play dates. I wanted them having going to soccer practice, going to art class, whatever it was. I didn't want things to be stopped. And definitely things did get stopped. But as much as possible, my focus was on moving them forward through their lives and keeping it as normal as possible.
Hmm.
You know, um, my older daughter asked me not to show up at school bald. That was the only request she had. She didn't care if I was bald when we were walking through the mall, but or anywhere else. But she was like, "Don't do it. Just don't come to school bald." And I'm like, "Okay." So I didn't. I had a hat on. I had a scarf on. I had a wig on. They nearly arrested me for picking up my younger daughter, so I didn't wear the wig again. So I didn't
Oh
look
my
like.
goodness.
Well, it wasn't quite that drastic, but I bought this really cute little short straight haired wig. I have curly hair, so do
I
something
understand. Yeah.
similar kind of color, like it was a kind of a reddish brown, and it was really cute. And I put it on, and I drove through the bank, who didn't recognize me, so I whipped it off and threw it in the seat beside me, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll cash your check." I'm like, "Thank you." And then I went to pick up my younger daughter at school, and I was walking next to her, um, and following along sort of beside the teacher who was walking with the whole class. And I was like maybe 5 steps behind her. And all of a sudden, it was the end of the school day. She saw me with Sarah's hand, but she saw me from the back.
Oh.
And I realized, having curly hair, having longer hair, the majority of my life was spent with it in a ponytail, screwed up on top of my head, not down around my face. And this, had bangs it was cute. It was really cute. And I just thought, and she was like, Sarah, my daughter's name is Sarah. And Sarah turned around and she's like, who are you with? And I turned around and I'm like, hi. And she's like, oh, I didn't recognize you. I'm like, yeah. So that was the end of the wigs for me. I was like, I'm done. I was, they weren't comfortable anyway. So it was just, let's leave that off and just go balder in a scarf or with a hat.
Yeah.
And look like me as opposed to.
That's funny. And I think humor is part of making it real also. Those you can, as a girlfriend's guide, as you informally call it, I think that adds that reality to it.
If you don't find the humor in life, I think you have a choice. And the choice every day of your life, and sometimes many times a day, and sometimes especially in traffic, you have a choice to be positive or negative. And if you're negative, you're misery to be around, and you're miserable.
Yeah.
And it's like the act of smiling makes you feel better. So try to find the joy, try to find the funny. I had a very straight line from the beginning of chemo through the end of chemo. I went to every single one on time. I got done, and then all hell broke loose for me, and I had all sorts of complications, and ultimately got pneumonia from valley fever, and my PET scan of my lung kept lighting up, so they wouldn't clear me to have my final implant change for a year. And they didn't think I had cancer again, but because I'd done all these scans, but they were like, yeah, we can't clear you as long as that's there. We can't clear you. And I'm like, what is it? And they're like, it could be cancer. It could be scar tissue, or it could be TB. And I thought, here we go. I'm thinking that TB is the good news.
Right.
So
for a year.
For a year. So I just kept laughing about it. And I was laughing about it with my other survivor friends. I'm like, when do you get to laugh about TB being the good news? Like, that would be the good news. And so it's certainly better than lung cancer. So, and then finally I ended up having lung surgery, which was a whole nother thing. And then they took out the thing they kept seeing, which was scar tissue, a granuloma formed around old infection, and it wasn't anything. And then I got to have my final surgery. But it was just, if you can find the humor in tuberculosis, I think you can find it in just about anything.
Yeah.
But, I'm Irish, and we sometimes have a very dark sense of humor.
Yeah. I relate to it. I'm not Irish, and I relate to it. So, you have 2 companion books. I consider them companion books. Do you consider them in that way to the?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just really, the first one was the Keeping Your Sanity Intact organizer. And that really came out of me thinking, what would it be like? And what was it like when I had lots of people offering to do things for me that I wasn't necessarily ready to take them up on? So, the girls were at a Catholic school, and the Catholic school, they're amazing. They're like, we're going to cook for you. Mm-hmm. And then everybody wants to sign up and they want to cook for you. And I was like, it's so complicated. Like I'm eating the way I'm eating, which was at that point, anything that sort of tasted good and had almost no pepper, because I had mouth issues. And so I just was like, it's easier if you just pick up for me. Let me just tell you where to pick up. And so that was like, oh, I guess that's a list. What else is a list? Well, everybody needed to know, where each girl went to soccer practice, what day of the week, who the team parent was, who the coach was. And so I made another list of activities after school and who's the main contact person, because I had an amazing experience with my older daughter's soccer team. And those parents were phenomenal. And they would pick Kate up and drop Kate off, and they would uh, send their daughters home with us after a game and then pick them up. And I never had to drive anybody anywhere. And they were amazing, amazing, amazing people, amazing families. And, but sometimes you need to be able to call somebody and say, oh my gosh, I can't. Can you? And I wanted to have all of that in one place. And so that's where the organizer came out. It was just like, and then I thought about younger kids and like, it's all the stuff that's what they call a mind dump, right? All the
Mhm.
stuff that's in a parent's head that they know innately. I know that my younger daughter slept with this stuffed animal. My older daughter liked to listen to this book on tape before she went to bed. I know who wanted more peanut butter and who wanted more jelly. All of that stuff has a place in that book because you're not always going to be the person doing it.
Mhm.
And it's really hard for us to give up control. And I would go to bed, the night after chemo, 2 nights after chemo, 3 nights after chemo. Um, and I would hear my husband and my daughters out in the living room. It's like being 3 years old again, and your older siblings are up with your parents or with each other. And, and I felt I was too exhausted to be a part of it. And I felt sad that I wasn't a part of it, but he was also handling all those things. And, what shampoo works better on what kid and I mean, all of that stuff. And it all needed a place to go. So that's where that came out of. And that came out first. And then the second one is the gratitude journal, which quite honestly is good for everybody. But there have been so many studies done about starting your day with gratitude and finding the gratitude for everything. And I wanted to make that um, attainable. And I wanted the things that helped me get through every step. I mean, I spent a lot of time imagining myself skiing because I love to ski, and skiing to me is like flying. So it was like that freedom and that
Mhm.
wind and that lightness of being when it's going really good. And I couldn't wait to go skiing, and I couldn't go skiing that winter. And a year later, I was skiing, and I was
Mhm.
on, and I cried the whole way down the first run. I cried the whole way, and I'd had lung surgery a month before, and I made my doctor prompt. No, that was the next year. Uh, no, that was yeah, that was the next year. So I skied that year, and then the next year I had the lung surgery, and a month later I was skiing again. Skiing kept me moving forward. Snorkeling kept me thinking about that. That was another thing. Just and so I was like, people talk about gratitude journals, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so grateful for my health." Absolutely, but I'm also really, really grateful for lip balm.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm grateful that dark chocolate exists.
Mhm.
I'm grateful for a ice cold glass of water, which I have in front of me right now. Like, it doesn't have to be the big picture.
Mhm.
And when you are going through something that is so devastating, sometimes it's I managed to walk to the post, to my mailbox and get the mail today, and that
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
that was huge. And so I can be grateful for that. And I can be grateful for hot water in my shower. And, just to try and make gratitude attainable when you think there's nothing to be grateful for or when you're just terrified. And I won't ever say that I wasn't scared, and I won't ever gloss over the fact that I was, but I worked really hard not to indulge it for too long.
Well, and what I'm hearing is a lot of the way that you saw through the situation, not denying true human feelings, because the human experience isn't a smooth road. But what you've provided is guidebooks through.
I wanted to, as everything, like I said, I had sort of a beginning and an end that were very difficult with that whole process of cancer, and that I found a lump, and I had 3 months before it was actually diagnosed. I was there. I was having tests, nothing, everything was coming back that I was perfectly fine. There was no cancer in my body, according to the medical tests that I had, which was a mammogram and an ultrasound and a fine needle aspiration. So that's one of the reasons why when people say, oh, it's just DCIS, we can watch it. I'm like going, that's what they thought I had. At the end of that summer, at the end of that 3 months, they thought I had DCIS, but they decided to, I was like, get it out of me because it was big. And I said, get it out of me. I went in, I had the double mastectomy, which made everybody happy because the doctors were scared they weren't going to be able to, they wouldn't have seen it if it came back because it didn't show up easy. And so to me, that beginning was very difficult. Chemo was horrendous, but it went according to plan. And then after that, I was scheduled at my last chemo on March 8th, and I was scheduled to have my exchange surgery in May, and I got an infection in my breast, which is a whole new exciting thing. But because anywhere you have something that is fake in your body, you have air around it, you have room for infection to go. So I don't know if I had a sinus infection or I had a bladder infection or whatever, but there was something circling in my body, and that's where it decided to head. And so every time we made a plan, it got pushed back. And from my initial mastectomy prior to chemo to my final implant surgery was 2.5 years. And I had about 9 surgeries under general anesthetic in that time. I had 13 times they invaded my body. So there were 4 that I was awake for different things. And I just kept seeing, my husband would say to me, we're in the tunnel. That's all we're doing. We're just in the tunnel. Where are your feet? That's all that's going on. All that's going on is where my feet are. And when you're in a tunnel, you don't look right, you don't look left because there's nothing to see. You just put a foot in front of the other. And it was very, very hard. And it was very frustrating. And it was at times really scary. And I did not think there would be anything more scary to my children than seeing me sob. But I also dealt with them honestly about how I felt. I was like, I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated we can't go to Maine. I'm frustrated that I changed all the plans I had just made and then the doctor changed the surgery date on me. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm sad or whatever. But for the most part, my dark nights of the soul were at 3 a.m. And that's when I wrote.
What did you put the other book that you are still called to write? Did it stay on hold completely, or did you find yourself always called? You're already saying no, so you were still called to it during that time.
I didn't start it during that time.
Ah, okay.
I was keeping my blog going. And I kept my blog going, and I wasn't outrageously consistent at certain times. I wasn't as consistent. Like the last year and a half, I have the blog post up every single Wednesday. I think there's been 2 Thursdays, I will admit. But but generally speaking, it's every single Thursday. I mean, every single Wednesday. And for me, it was in my head. And eventually, I printed out my entire blog. And I started going through it editorially, saying, what are the subjects I've talked about? What is the through line? And I wrote it probably 3 times. And then I found a wonderful editor who is a memoir editor. And I sent it, I called her and I talked to her, and I didn't give it to her. And another maybe year and a half went by, but I'd chosen her. And it's like, when I spoke to her, I was like, this is an interesting, this is my problem. Here's my problem. Now that I've removed the chemo cupcakes and carpals information out of there, I know I am capable of writing a better book than this is right now. And I kept hearing my friend Barb, who was the inspiration for the guide, saying, don't write a blog book. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, don't print your blog. Don't just print your blog. Write the book. And by the time Chemo, Cupcakes, and Carpals came out, Barb had passed away. And the book's dedicated to her. Um, and I had found this wonderful woman, Brooke Warner. And I just said to Brooke, I said, here's the deal. I could go ahead and I could publish this and I could self-publish it and I would like maybe sell, but I'm a better writer and I know I am, but I don't know how to do it. And here are my issues. My issues are it needs to be really, really good because it will be noticed because I'm my father's daughter. And I want to deal honestly within this book with my family, but it's not about my dad. And
Mhm.
I tried really hard. I wrote it one entire time, wrote it all the way through an entire draft, not talking about my family life prior to cancer. And it was really not the whole story. And then I had to figure out how to incorporate my childhood, incorporate the things that made me into the person that I am and the mindset that I am and the fact that I was probably born optimistic. Um, but but also the lessons I learned just growing up. And certainly um, the way I dealt with my children with cancer, the way Christopher and I chose to be with them was very open, and I wanted our entire community to know. I did not come out on Facebook to my Facebook friends for a very long time about going through cancer because I just wanted to go through it. But the people who knew me in a daily life, they all knew.
Mhm.
Because when my father was sick, I was 24, and we didn't tell anybody. It was a different time. He
Mhm.
was a major public figure. He wanted to beat it. He didn't want people digging his grave, as he put it, before it was time.
Mhm.
And but I found it really hard
Mhm.
because I wasn't telling my boyfriend at the time. My girlfriends didn't know. I didn't have any support outside of myself, my mother, and my brother, and I didn't feel like I could lean on my mother or my brother because we were all dealing with it. So I didn't want that to happen. I wanted my kids to be able to talk to anybody they wanted to talk to. I didn't care. I just wanted them to be able to reach out for resources and have them. So that book I had to write honestly.
Mhm.
And the great thing about Brooke is that she really got it. She really understood what I'm reaching for, sort of technically as a writer, what I'm reaching for to really tell the story as well and as cleanly and clearly as possible, but uh, to be of service that way. And it was through working it over with her that I really realized what my real overall thing is, and it's about my kids, and it's about being a good example to them. And I, you know,
Yeah, because it's interesting. I mean, it's like you say, you come from a writing heritage and all of that, but you're not writing frontier stories. You're not your dad. You're your own. You're an author in your own right. So that distinction is just as crucial. I really understand that.
it's and at the same time, it will completely open doors as far as nobody's going to publish me without it being good, but I will probably have a chance at getting it read by people I want to read it, and and that's great because
Mhm.
I have my own publishings. I had a book come out that was a collection of quotes from Dad's work, and that
Right.
was really really successful, and so I have a little foot in the door, and getting more so that's helpful when you're trying to publish something, but at the same time I'm demanding of me that it be the best thing I can possibly write at this point in my career and my ability. It needs to be top. And that way I know that I'm putting my best out there and that I've delivered the hope and the strength and the message that I want to deliver. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, as far as not writing what my father does, it's funny. Um I sat in acting class when I was like 29. I was sitting in acting class and I was feeling old, and
Oh, the
and
days. Yeah.
oh goodness, and I was old for LA at that time.
Mhm.
TV is God in Los Angeles, and I was 29, and I looked. I could have played 25, but I wasn't playing 18. And I thought, what about all those books I've wanted to write? And I wrote a one line sentence of every book that I thought about writing,
Mhm.
nonfiction, fiction, the whole nine yards, and I came up with I think 27 of them, or it was some ridiculous number, and I thought, well, it's time. So I started writing, and I was very practical. I decided to write something I knew, and I decided to write about an area I knew like the back of my hand, and I decided to uh, write middle grade fiction. And yes, I'm not published yet in middle grade fiction, but it's coming. It's going to
Yep.
come. But
A
part of it
mystery, right?
a mystery, and
Mhm.
I didn't want to have I didn't want to have to write sex scenes. So I was like, I need to write about like 12-year-olds. I really do. For me, right
Yeah.
now at this point. But I started that book 25 years ago. And I wrote it and I worked on it and I put it aside and then I worked on it again. And I was actually doing a major overhaul of it with some really great, wonderful ideas when I was diagnosed. And I had to put it aside because I couldn't write fiction when I was going through all that. I couldn't.
Interesting. So the spiritual memoir and the middle grade mystery are both underway at the same time. I understand one was put aside, but
Well, they're both underway now, absolutely
right.
at the same time. And there's another one that I've got 197 pages of a probably 250-page historical adventure story.
Oh, interesting. That I didn't find any.
No, that's good. I haven't. I don't. I talk about that, but I haven't. I haven't worked on it for a while because I. That's what I was doing at the same time as the middle grade. When the middle grade would go off to the editor I was working with, I was working on the historical, and I was deep in major research for it. And chemo really screws with your brain,
Mhm,
so I couldn't. I couldn't work fiction because I was trying to stay here
mhm,
alive,
mhm,
and I couldn't write um, about a kid who loses both parents in a horrible accident when I was trying to not die on my children.
mhm.
Um, so it was like I was working on both of them, and then when I put down the historical, it was like I still haven't picked it up again because I need to get back in the zone. I need to start rereading the research I'd done and going back over it and really being back up to speed on what I was working on then. And that's probably 2019 project.
Mhm.
And these two are this year.
This year, yeah. 3rd quarter, you think?
Oh, I don't know about publishing, but yeah, I'm hoping they'll both be finished and at a position where I'm hunting for how I'm going to publish them, deciding how I'm going to publish. But because independent publishing is now way more respected and it's attainable by everyone with a computer, um, that is a possibility. But I don't know. I haven't made that decision yet. I may,
Mhm.
throw the pasta at the wall and see if it sticks a little bit, and then make my decision as well. I might try to mark, send it around. But I just at this point, I'm still deeply invested in both of them at a very sort of intense level. So I think that maybe they'll be done third quarter. I'm hoping. I'm
Mhm.
hoping. And yeah, and I think Brooke's thinking I fell off the face of the earth. But
Oh,
yeah, we'll find out.
well, yeah.
We'll find out when I send it back to her and go, "Hey, guess what?" But the memoir has been very hard for me to work on. It's emotionally difficult. So I started something new because I've been avoiding it. So talk about writer's block. I didn't have any writer's block. I was just avoiding. I wasn't even procrastinating. I was avoiding. So yes,
Honest.
I
Yeah.
started this week just setting the timer for an hour on my phone and just saying I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to write on it. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to go through her notes and I'm going to work on it for an hour. And you know, yesterday it was about that. The day before it was 2 hours. So I'm just trying to give myself a little break and then do something afterwards that is relieving because going back into there is very difficult.
I imagine it would be, yeah. You mentioned that it was when you were in acting class when you were 29 that you had this thought about all that you an awareness that you had all these ideas already for books. W- Was that when you decided you didn't want to continue acting?
No.
Because you acted for quite a few years,
I
didn't you?
acted for quite a few years, but I sometimes I think back on all the people I knew in acting class that don't have careers, and all the people that do have careers. And when I really think about the people who are actually actively working right now, out of everybody that I was in acting class with, I think there are three. And and that's probably out of about 4 or 5 thousand people that I'm thinking of who actively make a living and don't have to work another job.
Okay.
So um, it's a really tough career that way because it
Mhm.
is really whim driven, and you need to be at the top of your game when you have your moment. Um, and age is a very different thing now, because the women of my generation who had careers that were developed enough in their 20s that they could continue to act, they just kept going,
Mhm.
and it's phenomenal. But it wasn't that way if you were 28, 29, 30 in Los Angeles and not booking regularly. So, no, really, that came from my husband saying to me, "What would you do if every fear in your life was taken away?" And I kind of looked at him and I said, "What?" And he said, "You're not too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, too old, too young, not enough money, too much money." I don't know if that ever happens. All of that. If all of those fears were taken away, what would you do? And I said, "Have a baby." And he said, "Yeah, that's what I was thinking." And I'm like, "Well, then we better go find a house because I don't want to raise kids in an apartment." And I wanted a piece of grass. And so we went and found a house, and I started, I, went off the pill and, just said, "Okay, let's just see what happens." And I told my agents and my manager that I was done, and I was walking away, and I called up Larry Moss and I said, "Larry, you've been an amazing, amazing experience in my life. You taught me to be an incredible, proficient, technically savvy actress, and I'm forever grateful. But, I have this amazing husband, and we've been married for 5 years, and we want to have kids, and I need to do that now." So, and in the year that after I made that break with everybody, um, I had three auditions, and which isn't a lot, but it was three, and they were ridiculous. One was for a pilot that a friend of mine was producing that I didn't know she was producing. This is how God works. And the director of the pilot came with a friend of my mother's as her date to our Easter dinner the day before I auditioned for the casting director, and I didn't get it. And then my brother called me up and said, "I need you to come in and audition because you're not right for the part." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "I need you to come in and audition because they keep thinking they want to cast this character young. I want her to be 40, and I need somebody who's 25 to 30 who can act, who I can use to show them why." I said, "So you want me to come in and audition?" He said, "Because you're good." I said, "Thank you." And he said, "So I can prove to them that we need more age." I said, "Okay." And so, of course, I didn't get that one. And then the third one was equally ridiculous. And a friend of my mother's, who's a photographer, called me up and said, "Larry Hagman wants your phone number." Okay. And I had met him
Oh,
once
okay.
for 10 minutes in the lobby of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion on opening night of Cabaret in like 1987. Now we're talking, it's like 96. Okay. And he remembered me and he wanted me to audition because this is who he was. And he was asking if I was still acting, and he wanted me to audition to play his daughter in a TV series. And she said, "So is it okay if I give him your phone number?" And I'm like, "Oh, why not?" Like, this is ridiculous. Why not? And so I went and I auditioned, and I got called back, and this took forever. And I kept thinking, we've just bought a house. we have a dog, and they're going to move me to New Orleans for 24 weeks. My husband's going to kill me. And I was like going, okay, God, this is yours. This is yours. This is yours. I told you I was quitting and I was just going to be a mom and that was going to be great. And I'm just giving it to you and I'm just going to keep moving forward. And they decided not to cast the character and move her until they saw if they got picked up, and they didn't get picked up. So the series did not continue. They did 6 episodes. She was supposed to come in the 6th, and they didn't get picked up for more. So that was the end of that. I was like, okay, I get it. Like everybody says, it's who you know. I was at the top of my craft. I had opportunities that were ridiculous and nothing happened. So it was kind of a great thing because it was like, no, you really don't want to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
you're done. So I'm going to prove to you that you're done. So you never question it.
Right. No stone unturned for regrets or anything like that. Yeah.
Everything I could to make it happen my direction, and it didn't. And so,
Yeah.
but the other day I was thinking back to this one trip Christopher and I took to my family ranch in Colorado. And we'd been married maybe a year, maybe 2. And it was a very bucolic trip. We would get up in the morning and we'd have breakfast and then we'd go sit on the porch and we'd read books and then we'd go for a hike and then we'd, go into town and have dinner and look at the art galleries and whatever. And I was writing that middle grade mystery, and it was the most peaceful time I'd ever known. And I kept thinking, I want to get back to that feeling that I had of just these days that are easy. I'm not finding out 20 minutes before I have to be somewhere that I have to be there and I have to be ready and I have to audition. I'm not in that constant motion. And I just was like, this is more me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've tried to create. But
yeah,
kids make that a little less easygoing because you're always busy with them. But
before we wrap up, I have a couple questions I want to leave with.
Okay.
One is, how do you want to be known?
You mean for posterity?
Yeah.
As a good mom. But really, wife and mother is, you have so many opportunities in your life where you're like, I have completely screwed up my children. So I just want to know that I want them to be happy, productive, find things that excite them, and they do, and they are, so that's good. But other than that, personally for me, I'd like to be known as an author. I'd like to be known as someone who makes you feel better for being around them. Mm-hmm. I like to lift people up. I believe that's part of my journey, is to lift people up.
Well, I just have to add from a personal perspective that you have already done that for me. And I have just talked to you for the first time today. And even before we met, just reading your work and researching you, I felt that. So mission accomplished there.
Thank you so much.
And then I also would love you to share anything that I haven't asked you. Is there anything you'd like to add that you want people to know?
About me? I'd say...
or anything.
About me, visit my website and follow me, find out what I'm doing, and get excited because the books are coming. And we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And perfection is truly kind of boring after a while. You need a little, I'm not saying that it can't be positive. I'm just saying a completely clean white piece of paper is a beautiful thing, but after a while you're like, what can I do with that? And I think that everybody's got that thing inside them that's waiting to be born forward. And I just would love people to believe that they can do whatever is in their heart. I've done it. I did it with acting. I'm doing it now with writing. I've done it with having children. singing. I had 4 miscarriages. I have 2 kids. I had cancer. I'm here. I have great friends from forever. I have people I met last week that I'll keep in my life forever. It just, um, but we're so perfect looking on our Instagram accounts. And, if you could see my desk, that's all down here, not perfect, but it works. And sometimes the dishes need to be left so that you can go outside with your kids.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And we will have in the link, in the show notes, links to all your books, including the quotes that you did for your dad, the compilation that was a bestseller in '89, I think.
88, but that's okay.
'88. Thank you. Thank you. And the 3 we talked about. And there will be a status of the books that you're working on, those 2 and 3 if you're at that point. So we'll
Yeah.
have all that. We'll have links to your website so people can follow your blog. And also, I know you're active on social media. Where do you hang out the most? Which channel?
It's really interesting. I hang out a lot. I'm on Facebook, but and I'm active on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, especially on Monday nights. I'm part of a group of cancer survivors
Okay.
that have a chat. So breast cancer social media, #BCSM, is a great place for anybody who's uh, looking for a support group and can't get out of the house to get to one for whatever
Super.
reason. And I'm very active on Twitter, but I found Twitter to get more and more depressing. So, and more political, and I get angry when I'm on it. So, I've been really enjoying my Instagram account a lot because I feel like I get to be positive and engaging there. And that's part of it. And Facebook, I'm engaging with readers and writers because I do have a lot of sort of teaching tools, writing tools on my website that I've created for people who are writing.
Super. We'll have links to all those. And I know right now, and it could change by the time we air, but right now you have a tool on your website that has questions, 25 questions
Yes,
for
25
writers.
character questions.
Yeah. So it's very cool.
It's very fun. It's actually very fun.
So thank you very much. I am thrilled that you took the time to talk and appreciated and enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank you so much. I'm just so grateful you reached out. I really am.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye for now.